I am the night nurse on intensive care at Northgate General. And after 8 years on this floor, the building talks to me in a language I understand. It speaks in small alarms and big silences, in the polite chime of an elevator that apologizes before it opens, in the steady breath of air handlers turning lungs that are not lungs. The rooms have habits. The monitors have moods. People imagine that nights are quiet, but quiet is just noise that knows how to hold its breath. On this Tuesday, the shift turned from swing to full night sometime after 2 o'clock, when the cafeteria lights clicked to a dimmer that makes even steel look sleepy. My assignment was the east side, beds E03 through E06, a rotation I could map blind. E04 was staged but empty. It is our negative pressure room. Clean. Stocked. The bed perfectly made with corners that could cut a finger. There is comfort in an empty room on a night like this, the way a calm sea comforts a sailor who trusts maps. At 2:14 a.m., the dome above E04 lit amber and pinged the console with a soft request. Assist. That word belongs to someone with a hand. E04 had no hand. I glanced at the station display and saw vitals populate the tile as if a patient had already been admitted. Heart rate 58. Pressure 108/64. Oxygen 96 on room air. Respirations 12. The bed status board still said vacant, and inside the room, the ECG leads lay coiled like a snake that had learned manners. This hospital means to be rational. The room meant to be otherwise. Glitch, I said, and then corrected myself because my charge nurse Marco hates that word. An anomaly, with polite timing. We walked down the short corridor, past the crash cart that has saved more people than all our prayers combined. The door to E04, heavy by design, stood exactly 2 inches open, as if the room had taken a small breath and held it. Negative pressure pulls inward. 2 inches outward is a choice. We pushed in with elbows so as not to teach the building bad habits. And the dome light went dark with the satisfied sigh of a task completed while remaining a mystery. The HEPA tower should hum. This one vibrated without voice, the way a throat hums when the mouth refuses. The power rocker sat on. The green indicator was not green. I checked the power outlet. Firm. I checked the breaker list we keep taped above the headwall. Dome lights. Negative pressure. Oxygen alarm. HEPA auxiliary. Nothing tripped. We stepped out and closed the door because that is what policy asks for when understanding is absent. At 2:26, the elevator down the far hall chimed once, gently, and opened to our floor, and then closed again with the same politeness. Sometimes the elevator carries echoes at night, an empty cart, a forgotten delivery, but the console never notices those events. Tonight, the console noticed everything. When we returned to the station, the E04 tile still wore numbers belonging to a living person who had not been admitted, and the call event had been stamped cancelled by unknown. Unknown is a word that appears only when a human finger presses the headwall cancel, because that finger, unlike a login, has no name in the system. Marco and I watched the hallway camera on replay. At 2:30 hardware and 41 seconds, the door to E04 eased itself from closed to that same tube winch confession. No hand, no shoulder, just the slow swing of something that knew how doors feel from the other side. At 2:36 and 2 seconds, the door opened the rest of the way, as if an invisible gurney needed clearance. At 2:30 or 6:14, the camera showed us entering. There are nights when the present arrives a dozen seconds before you do. Security walked up in pairs the way they do. 2 first names, 2 belts, 4 calm eyes. They leaned in over our console, watched the door do its trick again on the replay, and did not offer jokes. While they stood there, the console chimed once more and displayed a label none of us had configured. Chart request. Then, 5 seconds later, cancel. Unknown. The screen had invented a category and cleared it. And for a heartbeat I felt the childish urge to pull the plug on the whole floor and let the building learn our silence. At 2:58, the elevator chimed a third time. The doors sighed open. A man in a marine blue volunteer vest stepped out holding a red patient chart binder. Volunteers do not carry charts. Volunteers carry flowers or the time someone cannot bear alone. He moved with the unhurried certainty of staff, looked at no one, and walked toward E04. He reached the doorframe, and what happened next, I could explain by physics only if physics had a sentimental streak. The vest remained, hanging on the IV pole in a loose, recent shape, and the man was gone in the way a jacket is gone when the person inside it changes their mind. The red binder lay on the bed where a hip would have placed it. The spine of the binder wore a color band blue. Yellow. Blue? The code we use for respiratory triggers. The printed label carried a name I knew too well. 6 months earlier we had stood around this same bed as night nurses do, arranged like commas in a sentence we cannot improve. While a respiratory failure became permanent, I pressed the barcode to the scanner because the hand sometimes seeks ritual even when the mind begs to abstain. The scanner beeped, and our electronic record brought up a profile that exists only in archive. That reader cannot open the archive. While we debated that fact, the patient's tile on the station blinked once in recognition, then stayed unhelpfully green. Paper still tells truths electronics avoid. Inside the binder lay pulse oximetry sheets from an old template retired 2 years earlier. The paper had the color of laughter that has seen a basement. The first line's handwriting could have been mine after a long night. The witness signature at the bottom said, Chaplain H. We do not sign chaplains with an initial. We sign them with the name they offer us when rooms go quiet. We took the binder 2 floors down to medical records because superstition has rules. Laurie. Who runs that desk on nights with the nonsense affection of a relative who taught you manners? Cut the blue tape on the archive box for that patient. On top of the stack lay a red spine with the same label, uncreased by rings, too pristine to have ever circled paper. Twins belong in myths until they sit on a counter under fluorescent lights. Back in the unit, E04 looked as if it had agreed to host reality again. The negative pressure read normal. The HEPA indicator glowed green and low like a nightlight. The ECG leads, once coiled, had found their posts on the bed rails, clicked in with the audible confidence that says, ready? The monitor displayed a straight line that means nothing when no chest is attached. On the high-flow cart, the nasal cannula loop hung 2 centimeters off the edge, a distance exactly wrong for accident and exactly right for the way a face adjusts itself on a pillow out of habit. On the binder, the top page no longer showed oximetry. It showed a discharge summary dated today. The diagnosis line declaring acute hypoxemic respiratory failure, resolved. Someone had typed this, Or the template had grown the words like a tree grows a scar. The signature line waited. Our house supervisor arrived and read without commentary, because commentary feeds something nights do not need. We looked for the rational seams. Maintenance reported a scheduled network optimization window from 3 o'clock to 3:15. A routine that touches both the record system and the camera backbones. The volunteer desk scanner, according to its log, dropped offline at 1:10 and reconnected at 3:10, resenting its last successful checkout as if the past were a debt it liked to pay twice. Elevator access showed a vest checked out at 9 o'clock and returned at 9:30. Then, in use, again at 2:58, when the scanner stub replayed its state. When machines dream, they dream old states. A building can be haunted by procedure. A staff can be haunted by memory. Tonight felt like both. We kept our practice. Write the facts with times and little words that courts respect. 2:14. Assist call from empty room. Cancelled by unknown from headwall. 2:33. Door opens 2 inches on camera. 2:36. Door opens fully on camera. 14 seconds before staff enter. 2:58. Elevator delivers a volunteer vest with a red binder. Vest remains. Binder remains. Volunteer absent. 3:10. Scanner reconnects. Binder contains mix of old template and new date. ECG leads attached by no one we can name. Negative pressure normal after a period of theater. Security asked the kind of question that sounds like bravery. Would you like us to clear the room and lock it under incident control? The supervisor agreed. While they fetched the seal, I stood in the doorway of E04 and watched the less obvious details. In the lower right corner of the head wall, there's a scuff in the paint shaped like the state of Nebraska. Tonight the scuff looked brighter, as if a sleeve had polished it. On the bed's metal frame, faint oil from a hand that has done much and regrets a handful of things it cannot tell. These are tricks of a tired eye. But tired eyes built this profession as much as steady hands did. At 3:12, one of the maintenance techs called to say the backbone cycle had completed clean. We asked him to read the exact wording from the change window. He did. Optimization pass on record storage proxies and video retention indices. The words explain nothing, as the best words sometimes do. On the elevator footage, the doors had opened twice without badge-triggered calls, which happens when the controller wants to prove to itself that it is alive. The console, for its part, continued to list a patient in E04 without a transport order. Like a host who sets a plate for a guest that is late by half a year, I phoned respiratory to ask about the blue-yellow-blue band and whether any recent cases had borrowed an old label stock. They had not. The new stock has a different adhesive sheen under light. The binder spine on our desk had the newer sheen. The twin spine in the archive box looked matte, like a memory that will not translate to digital until someone tells it a story. Hypothesis. The supervisor asked in the even tone of someone who collects them like keys. I offered 3 because 3 looks like thought. 1. A cache collision between devices with poor sense of time, made more theatrical by a maintenance window that taught the past to speak with the present's mouth. 2. Environmental pressure and automatic doors conspiring to imitate intent. Air likes pranks when engineers sleep. 3. Human factors, which is the polite term for the way staff who care deeply about a patient will recognize their name on a red binder, even if that name appears where it should not. None of these explained a label like chart request on a console that cannot grow new words overnight. We sealed E04 and wrote our notes with the tiny obsessiveness that keeps people like us upright. In the unit log, which is paper because someone long ago insisted that at least one record should be immune to our network's moods, I wrote the times and the items. The dead indicator that vibrated, the live indicator that later glowed, the door that knew 2 inches before it knew open, the vest that remembered a person without the person, the binder that contained a tomorrow we had not earned. Marco signed under my line with a pen that refuses to dry out. A small mercy of a small pen. Around 4 o'clock, the hallway took on that pre-dawn gray that even fluorescent bulbs cannot argue with. We made coffee that tasted like the color of the walls. The building's voices went back to their usual grammar. The monitors resumed the lullaby of acceptable pings. Someone somewhere was born, and someone elsewhere lost. Because hospitals are factories of both. Before handoff, I walked E04 one more time from the threshold, eyes catching on the details that build trust. The bed was tight. The HEPA breathed like a cat content to pretend it does not care whether you exist. The monitor showed a thin line and no alarms. The dome above the door offered a soft green that means stand down. On the floor by the head wall, one mark that could have been a shoe print or the shadow of a cable. If I stepped closer, I would have to decide. So I did not. A good night on intensive care ends with the same word most nights do. Unresolved. It is not defeat. It is a place to set the next question. We do not measure our work by answers. We measure by the way a room held together for another 6 hours, while a person inside it learned to remain a person. We measure by the way a door that should not open does. And we go anyway. I left the binder with medical records under a polite escort, because sometimes we respect paper more when we suspect it has learned a trick. On the walk back, the elevator chimed once. Late. Like a friend who texts home after midnight so you can unclench your jaw. The screen at the station had cleared the phantom tile. The label E04 went back to the rectangular gray of possibility. When day shift arrived, I told them what mattered, and none of what would turn into superstition if handled wrong. The day nurse nodded and said, "We will keep it sealed until facilities signs off." She is practical. She does not talk to buildings. She does not need to. The building will talk to her if it wants to. And she will answer by adjusting a drip, and by soft laughing at a joke the patient's brother thinks he invented. If you ask me what happened, I can give you 3 neat answers and 1 messy one. The neat ones are systems and air and memory. The messy one is that some rooms remember their last job so well that they try to do it again even without a person to justify the effort. A room like E04 has a habit of serving a kind of emergency. Tonight it rehearsed for an encore, and we sat in the front row, and we clapped by writing things down. The last thing I did before clocking out was to touch the door frame with 2 fingers. A habit I will deny if you ask me in daylight. The paint was cool. The Nebraska-shaped scuff felt like nothing at all. As it should. I thought of the red spine in the box, and its twin upstairs. Of the discharge stamped for today when today had not yet finished becoming itself. Of the word unknown, used by systems that pretend not to believe in ghosts. I walked away, and the dome stayed quiet. And the building returned to its first language. Unresolved. Entry remembered. Shift complete.